June 2021 meeting of the Strategy and Policy Committee, and can I just take the opportunity to welcome Darren Edwards as our new General Manager, his first committee meeting with us in the whānau. So, no mai haere mai. Before we kick off, I'd just like to ask Councillor Tipania if he will open us with a karakia.
Kia ora. Hakataka te hau ki te uru, hakataka te hau ki te tonga kia mākina kina ki uta kia mātaratara ki tai hia ki ana te atakura he tio, he huka, he hauhu, tihe mauri ora. Cease the winds from the west, cease the winds from the south, let the breeze blow over the land, let the breeze blow over the ocean. Let the red-tipped dawn come with a sharpened air, a touch of frost and a promise of a glorious day and hopefully a good meeting. Kia ora.
All right, we're going to crack straight into it with apologies and declarations of interest. So I have apologies from His Worship the Mayor this morning. He's got some family stuff going on and we're sending best wishes to his son this morning. We also have apologies from Councillor Stratford. She is running late and will be with us in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Do I have any further apologies or declarations of interest? No, otherwise I will move those apologies. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor. All in favour? Those against? No, carried. Thank you. We have no deputations this morning, so we will crack on item 4.1, confirmation of the previous minutes. The recommendation that the Strategy and Policy Committee agrees that the minutes of the meeting held 4th of May 2021 be confirmed as a true and correct record. Would somebody like to move that, please? Thank you, Councillor Vucic. Councillor Foy, second. Thank you. Any comments, discussion, amendments? No? Fantastic. I will put it to the vote. All in favour? Those against? No? Carried. Thank you. That brings us to our first report. Item 5.1, Resident Opinion Survey. The recommendation in front of us that the Strategy and Policy Committee agrees to the changes of the frequency for the Resident Opinion Survey from annually to quarterly in 2021-22. Would somebody like to move that to get it on the table, please? I will move it. Would somebody like to second it? Thank you, Councillor Tipania. At this point, Darren, I will hand over to you for any commentary around this report.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. The report that you have in front of you, I take as read. The author is with us here today and can answer any specific questions that you might have. In summary, we are looking to move the resident survey, which is currently done annually, to quarterly, which reflects, if you read through the report, what the strategic direction is for council, and it highlights some benefits there. The cost and risk is minimal, and you'll see that through the report. It's really marginal, actually, moving from annually to quarterly. Richard, do you have anything else that you'd like to add?
Through you, Chair, I think just to also mention that we're also looking at how we do the survey. So at the moment we do a telephone survey. There is an option of doing a postal online survey, which would be about $5,000 cheaper. It means that when people give their feedback, it's much more considered. They don't get cold calls. So the regional council did it this way. Last year they sent out 2,500 letters. They select people from the electoral roll, and then they build their sample from that. They get about a 14% response rate, and then they also invite people to take part in the survey online. They had more than 1,000 responses to the online survey last year. We're just investigating that approach. We don't have to make a decision on this until September if we switch to the quarterly survey, but there are costs, benefits and risks of that approach, so we just want to fully explore those before we make that decision.
Thank you, Richard. Councillor Vucic.
Yeah, Madam Chair, thank you. I'm not against this report at all. Having a greater frequency when there's particularly much difference in cost is fine. However, I don't think it's going far enough. I'd like to see a little bit more innovation involved in how we engage. And what I mean by that is, if you look at some of the comments, strategic alignment, and it's making a mention to that close, and that is looking at developing systems and processes that produce meaningful, robust data, and it talks about empowering communities and so on. So I'm just wondering if we could implement, which I've raised before, have thought about a continuous process that is not limited to quarterly. In fact, you make available online and just about everything we do, a chance for people to give response back again. Put that online, make it available electronically, and obviously to our staff, which makes it easier to collate. And I think, Richard, you might be thinking along those lines when you consider some of those things. And given sort of recent, way we engage in recent events, I'd be quite keen to look at a continuous engagement policy as well, and how we can actually do that at a community level, at the federal level, and proceed in that manner. There's another item further down, and I'll make a similar comment when it comes to that.
Thank you, Councillor Vucic, and I believe we're due for an update on I can't remember what the name of the new platform is that is being beta tested at the moment. We had one update on it.
Absolutely.
That's the one, thank you, which I think is along the direction that you're talking about, Councillor Vucic. Thank you. Councillor Tipanea.
Kia ora, Chair. I was wondering how a company is going to do what they do 3 more times, but charge us pretty much the same. Were they ripping us off before, or are we getting a real good deal now? Because if we could change up contracts to get 4 times the work for the same price, I don't know. I was really curious at the pricing. How does that work?
Darren, Richard?
I can respond to that. A lot of the costs of doing the survey at the moment are in the reporting, so we wouldn't get a kind of a full report. We would get more of a sort of a dashboard type report. Also, their investment in their databases and things like that, they only have to buy that once, and then they can just reuse that. So, this is an approach that's used by the Northland Regional Council. If we go to the postal online survey, it'll be $5,000 cheaper. So, there is a lot of merit in looking at that. But it's all about what their investment costs are for them. And at the moment we get an annual report. It's quite a big document. It takes quite a while to compile all that information. We wouldn't be getting that 4 times a year. We'd just be getting a slimmed down dashboard that would have the sort of the key metrics.
Would yourselves as staff you just get the data and then give us the comparisons on the previous quarter and stuff like that?
This is something that we need to do some further work on. We want to integrate this feedback with the feedback we're getting through other channels like Us Nicely, so that we have a kind of integrated approach to measuring perceptions of council. And I would envisage this would be just reported up on a quarterly basis. But what we need to be doing with the information is using it to inform our decision making and our planning of services. That has not really happened in the past. It's been quite haphazard. And to be honest, most councils don't do that well. They do the survey, they take the information, but it doesn't necessarily kind of turn all the wheels inside the organisation.
And my final question was, I know it says here that previous council entered into a partnership with this Tauranga-based research company, Key Research. Is this not one of the, because it's not a huge contract, I guess what I'm asking is, are we locked and loaded with Key Research forever and all time, or does it get open for other research companies to say, hey, we can do that even better for cheaper, or what's that look like?
Absolutely. But I think we're sort of committed to them at the moment, because if we switch to another survey model, we don't have that comparability. Yeah. And we went out and did an exhaustive search of research companies around the country 3 years ago, and they were the only one that had a survey model that was based on a sort of a robust methodology. The others were just sort of asking questions. They actually have a mathematical kind of model that they use that determines the reputation score. And they are probably the leaders in the country, not just here, but in Australia as well.
Thanks for that.
Councillor Tiffany. Councillor Collard.
Yeah, I've read through the report and appreciate the necessity for feedback and information, but I was concerned that with the regularity creating a ho-hum sort of an attitude to not that bloody survey again, in terms of filling it out or responding in whatever method. And we just need to be very cautious that we don't create that exactly that. I know that as I get surveys through my emails, which I do read, or through the mail, you're looking at, oh, Jesus, another one. Because there are shitloads of them.
Thank you, Councillor Collado. That would be great to have that feedback taken into account when you decide on the how later this year. Thank you. Councillor Clendon.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense to go quarterly, get better information. I try to avoid doing it about the time we send out the quarterly rates demands, but other than that, my only concern, the idea of going to an online postal. Last numbers we had, I think about 23% of our households don't have internet access in Northland, so it'd be effectively excluding quite a big chunk. And yes, you get probably richer feedback through a postal survey, but it would only be people who are quite motivated. And my concern would be the most motivated people are the ones who've got the most to complain about for real or imagined reasons. So, yeah, I mean, just thinking it through, I think a combination of phone and postal could give you quite a rich sort of a profile of it. But I'd be reluctant to abandon the phone. I do take the point, it's often going to be superficial, but that may not be a bad thing. You know, top of head, what do you think about FNDC? Is not a bad, you can get quite a good, you can get some useful data from that, I think. So that'd be the only comments, but yeah, I think it makes more we can, more regularly we survey our customers, the better I think we can perform at the time.
Thank you, Councillor Clendon. Councillor Stratford, did you want to make comment or ask question?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that. Oh my God, I'm so loud.
You're okay, carry on.
It would be really helpful if we can regularly change what we need to survey. So I hope that if we're doing it quarterly, we will be able to. And for example, something that we've been asked to survey in the past is from Sea Change, the Far North Holdings. So, yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. Great feedback. Board.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I just note that this is a council mark requirement, and I wondered if it came with any recommendation as to how to go about the survey, bearing in mind it's only a resident survey, it doesn't capture the ratepayer, and also the postal methodology is actually going out the window a bit too, as more people do away with left boxes and also post boxes and go totally online. So there's that grey area there that you're not capturing a really true cross-section of feedback. It's a little bit patchy for me.
Yeah, there's always going to be that tricky transitional period. Hey, Richard, did you have any comment to that?
Just that the survey enables us to break down results for some of the questions, not all of them, according to whether people are ratepayers, whether they rent, whether they live rurally or in towns, whether they're Māori or non-Māori, which ward they live in. So we can sort of kind of slice and dice some of the information.
Thank you. Mr. Clark.
Just eventually, just acknowledge the point that Councillor Collins is making, but note that the 500 in the sample group that would be surveyed each time around and generated, so the same one, when you get the same one twice, is the theory. But also just try and understand that this is really a response to the CEO's KPIs and to Council Mark, that whole idea of relationship management and being more open and honest about the satisfaction we provide or not is driving us, but also it's part of a suite asked nicely, which we must bring back to elected members and show to you again. It's really quite a remarkable conversation now that we're having with our customers that we didn't used to have before. So that's like continuous, and we're getting enormous numbers of respondents coming through on that, and there's competition started now inside staff between all the different customer-facing agencies that are looking for the the best feedback from their customer base. So it's quite good fun when you see Tier 3 and Tier 4 meeting on this thing. So that's really seminal to our new relationships, and this is that other thing you would do in the mix to check in randomly on a slightly different basis with different questions on general service quarterly to give elected membership in the RC sort of another way of looking at whether we're making a grade or not. So hopefully this suits your questions today. That's the basis of your attention.
Thank you, Sean. I just had a couple of points that I wanted to raise. The first one is around what you touched on, Richard, around the how, the delivery of that, and recognising the conversation that's been had around the table this morning, knowing that that is an operational level decision that will be undertaken later this year. But my question is, as part of the suite, as response to the KPIs and Council Mark, are there any governance touch points in terms of us getting an oversight of how that decision was made and what that looks like later on as part of this work?
Yes, I think we just need more time to fully investigate it, and to take on board Councillor Clinton's suggestion of possibly doing a mix of a phone and so we're not we're getting sort of a more even sort of spread of methods. So we haven't thought yet about how we would report that decision back, but certainly it would be a conversation we'd be having through the communications portfolio.
Fantastic, thank you. So that leads me into the other part of my question, following on from what Sean has just said. We know that there's a lot of work that we need to do in this space. Council Mark have said there's a lot of work we need to do. So what are other parts of the suite, I guess, that we could be looking at? For example, could we be looking at utilising public forums and things? Are there other opportunities that as a committee we can be involved in developing or looking at? What does that look like going forward?
Richard, do you want me to?
Yep.
Entertain that?
Appreciated.
That's a really good question. And I'll come back to the comms portfolio and the discussions that I'm sure you and Richard are having. And for us, it's about how we keep ourselves relevant in the moment. And there's some things that take from recent engagement. I'm sure you'll agree. And so that's where we need to get ourselves into that space of being comfortable using different mediums of communicating with the communities. The way that the youth of today talk to each other is very, very different, and it's so interconnected. Whereas perhaps we need a step changes to how we really evolve and whip up some of those modern technologies. So I'm sure there'll be
ongoing conversation.
Definitely.
That's great, thank you. Welcome, Councillor Stratford. At that point, do I have any further comments, questions, or are we happy to put the recommendation to the vote? Happy to move on. Kim, can we get that just on the screen, please? The recommendation in front of us is that the Strategy and Policy Commission agrees to the changes of the frequency for the resident opinion survey from annually to quarterly in 2021-22, moved by myself, seconded by Councillor Tepania. All in favour? Aye. Those against? No? Carried. Fantastic. Thank you. Item 5.2, Kōpiri Aikiwaka Haurua Strategy, Sport Northland. The recommendation in front of us is that the Strategy and Policy Committee recommend that Council supports in principle the Kōpiri Aikiwaka Haurua Regional Sports Active Recreation and Play Strategy to allow time to plan how the strategy will be resourced and implemented. Would somebody like to move that recommendation, please? Get it on the table? I'm happy to move. Councillor Stratford, thank you. Would somebody like to second that? Councillor Busich, thank you. At this point, I will hand over to Darren for any staff comments. Thank you.
Thank you. And again, this is a comprehensive piece of work that has been undertaken through Sport Northland, looking at a regional approach as to how the strategy will work for us. And here today that we seek support for what you have in front of you. I don't intend to give any detail as to what the report looks like, The supporting document is large, however, I will take it as read. Untitled is with us today, and she's heavily involved in the development of, and I'm really pleased that you are here, Emma. And perhaps before I pass to you, Will Taylor, who was the acting general manager before I arrived, also had some involvement. So, Will, if it's appropriate, is there anything you'd like to add before we pass down?
Through you, Chair. Thank you for that, Darren. I think that's going hand in glove with this excellent piece of work is further detail in terms of an action plan as to how we might enact some of the key points in the strategy. And the Chief Executive has asked me to ensure that we put that together, and working with staff in Darren's team, that's exactly what we intend to do to try and make this strategy document a reality.
Thank you. Councillor Stratford, is there you, or would you like to go first?
Yeah, I'd start with what a wonderful job Sport Northland has done in helping this strategy for the region on sport and recreation spaces come together. They began with, key stakeholders, so at the table with sporting groups across the region, and a lot of them got to feed in. The uptake wasn't, very high in every part of the district, and I think part of the region, and I think that speaks to how busy a lot of our sporting, people are. The ones that are involved in feeding into a strategy like this are usually the coaches and the managers and the secretary of the sports club. So I got to feed in at a Sport Northland member level, and so I took on all the sporting, intel that I know from my communities and the sport code that I'm in touch with most, which is football, for those that don't know. And I think that they've come a long way from where the strategy was for the last term to today. But I do want to bring us back to, and I think that Councillor Court is probably going to raise it as well, that we, the spaces and places strategy that's being developed for our district and this regional strategy can't be delivered without us having a dedicated sports person in our council team. We've got all the roles of sporting split across many silos, and we used to have one person when I was just before I became a community board member. We had a really key person in that role who helped us achieve a lot of our sporting goals for our communities, and we haven't had that for a long time. And as we move into local government reform, I think this is an advantage for us if we can hurry up and get that person to, make sure that we're delivering on the wellbeing outcomes for our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. Councillor Vucic is the seconder. Would you like to make comment or ask questions?
Yeah, overall, I do support this. I think there's a fair bit of work to be done. I just note, I acknowledge that Sport Northland has been doing a lot of work trying to fit within the whole of the Northern region, quite a complex area because we're so spread out and small. And different demographics are significant. And if you look at, on page 40, for example, when you look at the deprivation there, and you're looking at the well-being which they do raise, sports is well known, and you can see many examples of that being used, where it has a major impact in helping with well-being, not only taking people from where they are, getting them the exercise and everything else, health-wise, mentally-wise, and also career-wise. It's actually a very good vehicle for keeping people healthy. So I'm all for sports and certainly support it. Overall, I think there's a lot of work to do in how we can better balance that. If you look at the trends in the deprivation, it's getting worse. So when you say well-being, we are actually failing in achieving that. And I'll be very keen to see sports being used amongst other things.
Thank you, Councillor Husich. Councillor Quendon and then Councillor Tiffany.
Thank you. Yes, I'm happy to support in principle, but acknowledging a huge amount of work's gone onto this, but there's still a fair bit to be done, as John mentioned. I couldn't in all conscience let it go through without challenging one statement or set of statements where we're told there are significant environmental benefits from parks and recreation, reducing pollution, promoting clean air and water, protecting ecosystem. I'd be interested in how they justify that. Actually, places like sports fields and golf courses are massive monocultures, some of the most heavily managed and some of the largest users of chemical sprays in the country. So I'd have to challenge that a little bit. I mean, it's not particularly costly to the whole thrust of the strategy, but claims need to be evidenced that they're going to be made, and I think you'd struggle with that one. More specifically, the strategy is very ambitious. There's a huge amount in it, and that's not a bad thing. And there is a level of prioritisation in terms of short-term, medium, long-term and ongoing. I think really you'd have to be a little bit tougher in suggesting what are the priorities going to be, and maybe that'll come as each of the member councils works out its own documents more thoroughly. It's going to cost a great deal of money. An awful lot of the issues, problems, challenges identified are only able to be resolved by large amounts of cash, and that's drilling right down to the whānau level, people who can't afford a tank of gas to get their kids to a game or to get a team of kids to a game. It's right through the cost of aquatic centres and gymnasia, that sort of thing. And it's not a bad thing to be ambitious, but the points made in the initial summary about raising community expectation, if this thing gets out in the public and everybody thinks, oh great, we're going to get aquatic centres and everything else all across the region, that's something that can come back to bite us. I think we need to be very measured in our comms, say this is a long-term ambitious program of work. There's an awful lot of water to flow yet before it gets achieved, or even bits of it. So just be a little bit conservative maybe in the comms, so we don't create that excessive expectation, given we don't have as much as a staff member, let alone many millions of dollars to start building some of the infrastructure that's obviously required and sought after. It is important. It's simply common sense that we do look to have a spread of facilities right around the region, so that you don't have large facilities one either side of what happens to be a political boundary. So it's good work, but I do think it wants a lot of refinement yet, and we have to just tread a bit carefully about those expectations.
Thank you, Councillor Clinton. Welcome, Mayor Carter. We're just on item 5.2 at the moment. Councillor Tiffany.
Madam Chair, if I might, sorry, I have to run out the door to attend a meeting with the Chief Executive with Nicole Rosie from Wakakotahi. Would you mind very much if I had 30 seconds? 30
Go for your life.
Is that all right?
Take a minute.
Can I just draw everyone's attention to the final paragraph on the bottom of page 30, and for the benefit of our audience, we need to acknowledge that Council is not currently resourced to give full effect to the strategy, and therefore recommend that Council support in principle rather than adopt until such time as further consideration is given to reviewing resource requirements to deliver on the strategy. Madam Chair, because I have to run out the room, can I rely on my colleague to make that deliverable and bound so this doesn't stagnate? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Court. Darren, do you have any comment in response to that?
Thank you, Chair. It's a really good question, Councillor Court, and thank you for bringing that to the front of mind. So I have had some discussions with the CEO, and a really good point. Whilst the strategy is really ambitious, the challenge for us is to look at how we are able to operationalise that. What does that mean for us? What are the budget implications in wanting to realise the strategy and our spaces and places plan? So that's something we're quite happy to take advice on that as to what a date and promise looks like and bring it back for further discussion.
Thank you. I might touch on that in my questions unless Councillor Tiffany would like to at this point. Councillor Tiffany.
Kia ora, thank you. No, I just wanted to say that I really like it. I like the statistics that are put here in the report. 62 of our schools, 86% of our schools in the Far North are low decile. We're lucky at Waikato that we tapped into the Rural Travel Fund. So this morning we took a van load of kids swimming in Kawakawa because our community pool here in Kaikohe closes over winter. So our swim club can keep going. So that's cool, our funding is used that way. So I was living this morning the statistics that are given within this report is what I'm trying to say, I guess. The question that I had, which I don't know if I read it or didn't read it or whatever, is what are the other councils looking at doing with the strategy? Are they looking at, do we know, are they going to adopt this in principle? Do they already have a staffer in place within the council who's going to action this, or do we have any insight into what our cousin councils are doing with this piece of money?
I can respond to that if you like.
Thank you.
They have a staff member, kaipara and whāngai, and they, because this is a regional strategy, it's not actually, whilst there are some relationship, the coalition, there's some things that we are actually already doing and that they are already doing or going to do towards. They don't need an extra staff member to adopt this strategy.
Thank you, Councillor Stretchford. And perhaps if I could be so bold in adding that one staff member is a good start. However,
they have departments.
To be fair to what the strategy suggests and coming back to our community wellbeing is what is the challenge for us as a council in being able to deliver on our implementation plan? That would be my big question. That's the work on for us.
Well,
thank you, Chair. If it helps, I mentioned at the outset of discussion that the Chief Executive's asked me to initiate a piece of work through colleagues in SPP. That piece of work would cover two areas. First would be the creation of a sort of ready reckoner, which would have down one axis, it would be the primary sporting organisations, and along the other axis would be the assistance which the council currently provides to each of those bodies or codes, so that, because at the present moment I don't think we have such a simple ready reckoner document that would allow members and staff alike just to compare and contrast and perhaps enable us to shift resources around should we see fit. So that's one piece of work. The second piece of work would be that this document, excellent document from Sport Northland, was written not through the lens of the Sports Hub. And it may be that with that in mind, that if we looked at the strategy and looked at what we're proposing to do, we might draw some conclusions from that. There's a major new addition to our portfolio. So those are the two pieces of work that Sean's asked me, working with Darren's team, to coordinate.
Sorry, the Sports Hub is in the strategy.
It is through you, Chair. Sorry, it is. But it's. I don't think that some of the conclusions which have been reached are fully reflected. That's the position that we've taken. It is certainly, there is mention of it, but I don't think the full ramifications have been fully recognised in the document.
thank you, Will. Councillor Tiffany, are you feeling satisfied with your response?
I am considering an amendment, but I don't know what, or how, or when. I also know that our Chief Executive has popped out, so probably the best time to put this amendment through. Because he is very averse to us simply adding staff members onto our council books. So I'm happy us to sound that out, if that's possible, Madam Chair.
Perhaps if I take councillor Vucic and I might make a couple of comments and then I'll come back to you.
Yeah, sort of following in from Will's comment and my colleague here, there's another piece of work that we need to consider. We did raise it before, and that is rationalising how we're handling all our sports hubs. And if you look at that, I think there is a strong connection between that, and potentially we are then engaging with the community in the respective areas and how, and this is not only the areas with the sports hubs, but in other more outlying places, we are then engaging with additional help from within our own community. So I think that needs to be in the mix as well, because, before we make any such decisions of what it's going to look like.
Thank you, councillor Vucic. So I'll keep my comments brief, but I wanted to just touch on the next step side of things. Darren, just wrapping up all of the korero that's been around the table. So my understanding is this is the high-level strategy that feeds into the Far North implementation plan, and that Far North implementation plan is yet to be finalised with Sport Northland. At such a point that it is finalised, that implementation plan will come to council for council to consider resourcing and how we might like to make that more effective going forward. Is that a reasonable understanding? Thank you. So I think it would be really good of the committee to keep that in mind, that at this point this is the high level, it's the implementation plan that the team is. We all love implementation plans, and that turns it into the doing. So perhaps a understanding of when council can expect that report would be really good, and we could capture that in our notes to ensure that we're having that conversation at a council level.
That's being finalised in July, is that out?
September. So the September committee meeting for the implementation plan to make recommendation to council. Councillor Stratford.
Just a quick question. I understand there is a draft of that already. Can we please workshop it before staff spend any more time on it?
A reasonable request.
So through the chair, I just say yourself, that we council the stakeholder group is identified, we've contributed to it for feedback, which closed last Friday. So to do that, I need to talk to RSL who's running the process and Sport Northland about extending it out. So I'd need to talk to the consultant that's running the process and the Sport Northland as well. If we want to workshop it, we did pencil in a workshop for it, which we decided we didn't need because we actually contributed to document the staff. But if you want to run one, we can reorganise it. Just a little bit of reorganisation is having the Sport Northland to make it.
I think the question is workshopping the implementation.
That's it, yeah. That's the space in places plan is the implementation plan for the strategy. But yeah, which closed as well the consultation or feedback from the stakeholder group last Friday.
So I think Councillor Stratford is asking to workshop the resourcing side of things of that implementation plan. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's almost like it's a little piece of the LTP pie or the next annual plan pie. So it is something that governance needs to have some consideration of, and to the stakeholders.
So I'm happy to workshop that and come back to you with a date.
How does the committee feel about that as next steps? A workshop leading into the implementation plan to be received at committee in September? Yep. Andy Finch.
So I'm just a little bit nervous about just workshopping the resourcing for one element of council business when I think if I was to talk to my colleagues across the business, then all of us could put a really robust argument for resourcing different parts of our business, additional resources for different parts of our business. I'm just really wanting to flag that the resourcing of council needs to be considered globally as opposed to on an ad hoc issue-by-issue basis, just something for the committee to consider.
Thank you, Andy. I definitely recognise what you're saying, but at the same time, the committee will be asked to support a strategy that without resourcing is not worth the paper it's on. So I think there is appetite around the table to ensure that there is a good understanding of what can and can't be done, also to manage public expectation. But we can take that conversation offline going forward to make sure that our strategies are meaningful and robust. Councillor Foy.
Thank you. I just have two questions about timing. So one being the final spaces and places implementation plan that's under development, linking in parks and reserves. What's the time frame for that to be completed? Further to that, what is the time frame for the EP 100 to be spatially planned to reflect the open spaces, parks and reserves?
Thanks, through Chair. Roger, you respond to that. I understand that the plan will come to the September meeting for consideration. Second question, Fund 2100.
Yeah, through the Chair, after considering just changes that are happening in the council and also things around the conversation, we pushed out the workshop that's planned for Fund 2100 to August, which the intent of that workshop was to bring back the public consultation on Fund 2100, which is part of the navigating our course consultation exercise back in March, April, and so that workshop has been penciled in as in calendar for August.
Sorry, my question relates to when it will be spatially planned, not when we'll get feedback on the words that we put out for consultation.
Through the Chair, in that workshop I expect to workshop with the councillors on what we're doing next with the Fund 2100. So the intent of it was always going to be what do we do next in place of consultation feedback, which could be spatially planning. We're also doing a spatial planning exercise, so we are challenging ourselves a little bit on Fund 2100, pushing forward with some spatial planning. I've had two workshops that have had spatial planning discussed in it, and trying to tee up the next one as well. And we would like to line it up with what we're doing in spatial planning and placement in the district.
Thank you. I didn't get a date here, but I'm sure that it will pop up soon. So the final spaces and places implementation plan will be completed and coming to as a draft to be adopted by council in September, did you say? It will be completed on July. It may get pushed back. We workshop it.
We were just talking about that in a workshop.
Thank you. I was just raising about the spatial planning aspect because as a council I did anticipate the FN 2100 to be spatially planned to then be able to be utilised as part of our district plan, as part of our final spaces and places and linking our parks and reserves and tying them with our sports facilities. Direction from the central government is really clear that we need to spatially plan, and I feel that's a big opportunity for our district and something we need to focus on and do properly instead of writing words. We don't need any words, we need spatial planning.
Thank you, Councillor Foy. Do I have any further member board?
Thanks, Madam Chair. This is very high level, and I want to talk to the flax roots level in relation particularly to the community board role in this strategy. One of the things that really, I guess, resonated with me was looking at the program gaps, which was on actually page 46, and how we can encourage more people to participate in events and things. I'd just like to know how council is actually capturing on a lower level, perhaps a register showing how we are enabling activities and already supporting active recreation, particularly through community board funding and events funding. Just some examples off the top of my head. We've just put a roof on Simpson Park. We've just put $40,000 towards putting a roof on Simpson Park, a building we don't even own. But we see the value in that community of that reserve that we do own as a strategic active zone, moving forward, an intergenerational zone, that community has a passionate desire to develop. So I feel that if somehow we have to have a register and capture what we are doing, because we don't have the strategy, and it could be a long way off because it's not in the LTP and it doesn't look like anything much is going to happen, and you're talking about moving something forward, but let's move it forward from the bottom. I mean, we have so many examples. We have Marina Street Wars. It's a biannual event between streets and the neighbourhoods and things like that. You know, there's a lot of activity going on, sporting activity that is not around your high valued assets. And we need to grow these. We had a marae out from Kāwhiri come to us beginning of end of summer. They wanted to do a fun walk. The marae's not even open. It needs huge maintenance. But it got all those people connected to that particular area together for a walk fun run. And we enabled that by helping them with reusable drink bottles and T-shirts, you know, to build their sense of belonging and encourage them, to enable them. And I think we have to start. This is a regional strategy, but we are a region of villages. It's not one size fits all for me. So from a board perspective, I'm speaking on behalf of the board. I mean, Bay Sports is another one. You know, we're constantly enabling them to do things. We have a historical Russell Waitangi annual netball rugby tournament in the community. People probably don't even know this exists, but it's so exciting, and the whole communities, both communities get behind it, and often it's played in Paigi, so it draws that community in as well. Where are we capturing these? If Catherine Truan has another part-time or employee coming in to help with the increased events budget, I believe that person could help fill a gap in actually capturing all the things we are doing and what we're contributing towards, not just events, but facilities that are existing that are in a really rundown state. So, I mean, things like, I was still wondering where Northland Inc. fit into this. You know, they're supposed to be putting a lot of money into them, and I see we've just been successful in getting the Waka Kotuku long paddle nationals coming up here in Anzac weekend for 3 days. You know, who brought them here? You know, who are we working with amongst that organisation to get this amazing, you know, Waka event coming nationally to the Bay? You know, I mean, I could go on for hours about the stuff that we actually contribute and the passion in our little villages and communities, but I think we need to start there, and we need to start some sort of register or catalogue as to what we are doing, so that when we come to the table as a partner with Sports Northland and the likes, excuse me, we can actually say, well, hey, we are enabling, you know, our communities. We are enabling marae. So that's all I've got to say. I think there's just a big gap that we're not capturing what we're actually doing. We're talking about ticket items and infrastructural items and huge play parks. We're not talking about neighbourhood stuff. So,
thank you, Member Ward, and I think that highlights the importance of that implementation plan, recognising that everybody has roles and responsibilities in active participation and passive participation across the far north, but you raised some really good points. Thank you.
Madam Chair, just to close, please.
Councillor Strickland.
So it's called a Play, Active Recreation and Sport Regional Strategy, and it's like Belinda and Madam Chair have highlighted, it's not just about facilities and sports parks, it's about all the walking tracks, it's about beach activity, it's you know, what's happening on private property on our marae, for example, with the, what are they called? The marae challenges that happen, and also their Waka Hauora strategy that a lot of hapu have, which is developing their own sports and health recreation plan, which my marae has actually done, which is awesome. So it's not just about bricks and mortar, it's about the uplift of health and well-being through our remember 10,000 steps in the north. It's little things like that, and the golf thing that they did, you know, communities came up with ideas, and Sport Northland helped enable them. But I know, like Belinda said, there's a lot of kaupapa that happens in our region that don't need anybody's help. but it helps Sport Northland to know so that they can put people in touch with them to share their ideas. And I just want to reiterate that this is the high-level document. I think everybody can't wait to get into the spaces and places strategy, which is more about us, but the key things that we have to deliver on in this regional strategy are the relationships, that sports coalition, which we should be damn well doing already, you know, having staff member at that table, and you know, everything else we are already doing. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. Before I put this to the vote, Councillor Tiffany, are you satisfied, or were you wanting to put an amendment up?
Or did you want to change it to adopt?
On that note, I do just want to recognise Anna and the report that you have put in front of us. I think historically it's been very easy to put a strategy in front of the governance team and say, adopt it, and then it sits on a shelf and we don't make it work. So I just want to thank you for that. And if you've got any comments.
Yeah, I just like to speak to that actually, because I'm really not a fan of my recommendation, just so you know. It sort of goes against every fibre of my being, because I would much rather just say adopt it and then, you know, crack on with it and find a way and make it happen. But honestly, after going through the development of the strategy and now the spaces and places plan, this is, I feel, very much the right thing to do for us. I'd rather that we took the time and knocked it out of the park instead of limping along in this space, which is what we're currently doing at the moment. So, yeah, I don't like the recommendation, but I do think it is the right one. So, and just, Councillor Pendon, just on your comments about the environmental benefits, that's if you bring in the reserves into the conversation as well. So that's where that came from. And you said when it goes online, I'm sorry to say it is online, it's publicly available now. So just to be aware of the expectations already being set.
Good.
Thank you, Anna. I've just got a note from Councillor Stratford here. Can we put a time to revisit this? So I think Kim has captured the date of September for our next committee meeting for the report. For the places and spaces implementation. And if you're wanting to put something further than that, I'm happy to take direction from you, otherwise I'm going to put it to the vote.
I think it would be good practice, because it says to allow time to plan how the strategy will be resourced and implemented, and that a report be received sometime. You know, we should have a report, we should have a timeline on when we'll know how the strategy will be resourced and implemented.
Would you be happy for that to be a note, or are you looking for that to be part of the resolution?
Part of the resolution.
You're the mover.
Darren, give me a time.
I just urge a bit of caution. I understand the feel in the room and the desire to want this move quickly. I fully understand that. We've given an undertaking that we will have an implementation plan back in September for consideration. There's a big piece of work that we need to do between now and then, and I take my colleague's comment about looking globally, whether we're looking at how we resource what it is that you have as an expectation for us to deliver. And I need to be mindful of that.
Madam Chair, as Councillor Court said, I'd actually like to see it time bound. A strategy is a strategy, and it could be over many, many years. So, you know, you don't have to implement it all in 1 year, 2 years, or 2 or 3 terms. So, in terms of the being ability to achieve is something you look at once you've decided on your strategy. And here we're looking at a strategy, so I'd prefer to see a time bound nature to that, so that we can actually adopt the strategy. But strictly speaking, we shouldn't be actually even thinking about how we're going to implement it until we've actually adopted it.
Looking for guidance and are mindful of time. So
would February be a good meeting date that we receive a report back on this item? Because the spaces and places will have been delivered. You know, we would have hopefully adopted.
Madam Chair, that's setting us to a February meeting. We currently don't have a 2022 formal meeting calendar, so.
In the first meeting of the new year. Because there's some urgency for our hub in Waikapa. However we're going to implement the governance aspiration to have a key staff member at the Sports Coalition. And a number of the other things that are in here, we already should be doing, like liaising with mana whenua, Hatua and Iwi on sport, what their aspirations are. And we are doing that through some of the marae and hapu development plans. Sorry.
Councillor Stratford, as the mover of the recommendation, have you got some words you'd like to propose to the committee? That a report on the progress of resource and implementation is brought to the committee in the new year.
First meeting of?
The first meeting of 2022.
The first meeting of the Strategy and Policy Committee.
And it may not have happened, but we need to know.
Roger.
Given that the Spaces and Places plan is in the throes of being finalised by the consultant right now, I'm just looking for some direction to feed back to Sport Northland and to the consultant on what we're doing with that. Because it's been finalised now.
That's what I heard as well. That it was finalised. We need to have a look at it though before it's totally finalised. Sorry, that's totally different.
The consultation on that is closed.
It is, but if we are going to be governance, it's our, it's the community's plan, but we've got to be able to uphold that. Governance needs to have some input into it.
And you're wanting to have that?
As staff have had input into that. So
prior to it being adopted?
Yes.
I'm really hesitant to do that.
Not
we don't
this
know
one, the places and spaces.
We don't know if Sport Northland would be willing to accept that. I personally submitted to it as a member of the community before it closed.
Not this one.
No, I recognise that. Yep, the consultation closed on that Friday a week ago.
Yep.
I'm a little bit confused now as to the direction we're taking, unfortunately.
So, yes, the report on the progress of the resource and implementation will be brought to the first committee meeting in 2022. So we're adopting this in principle. It doesn't slow this down, but we get a report on it. The Spaces and Places strategy for Far North District Council is different.
And that is the report that's coming to committee in September?
Yeah.
And that's when the resourcing consideration kicks in, I think.
No, there's resource implications in this regional strategy as well. It's in addition.
Yes, that's right. And what we are doing is we are not adopting this. We are
adopting in principle.
supporting in principle.
Right.
So the detail we went through is implementation to stay out. So that is what
the Far North one is ours. This is the whole region.
So we have an amendment in front of us. As Kelly is the mover,
Just a comment on that proposed amendment. As it reads, it assumes we've adopted the strategy, and we haven't.
No.
But allow time to plan how the strategy
The
will be
resource and implementation
implemented.
of the strategy.
Does Kelly have to move?
That's what it says. So we've adopted it, and you want to know how it's going to be resourced and implemented.
I'm keen to get this moving. So, Councillor Stratford, are you moving that amendment, and do you have a seconder?
In light of what Councillor Clendon is saying, that I would like to add at the end of committee meeting that an update report on the progress on the resource and implementation and potential adoption be brought to the first committee meeting in 2022.
Well, just put adoption of strategy.
And adoption.
You don't
Yeah.
And I'll be happy to second that then.
Thank you, Councillor Vucic.
Darren, do you or
Thank you.
your team have any comment on that you'd like to make? Hiccups we should be aware of?
No, it's just got to be correct.
Yeah.
We're happy with that.
Thank you. Councillor Vucic, you're seconding that amendment?
Yeah, good one.
Do I have any further comment or question around that amendment? No. So I'll put the amendment to the vote. All in favour? Aye. Those against? No. Carried. So that amendment becomes part of the substantive motion, which I am now ready to put to the vote unless I've got any further comments. No? Fantastic. So we have a resolution in front of us that the Strategy and Policy Committee recommend that Council supports in principle the Kōpiri Aitewaka Whaurua's regional sports, active recreation and play strategy to allow time to plan how the strategy will be resourced and implemented, and that the Strategy and Policy Committee request an update report on the progress of the resource, can we change that to of the resource and implementation and adoption of the Kōpiri Aitewaka Whaurua strategy to be brought to the first Strategy and Policy Committee meeting in 2022. All in favour of the resolution? Aye. Aye. Any against? No, that is carried. Thank you.
But you guys wish I was a bit later.
No, you're right on time. We had until 10:30 for that one, and you managed to sneak it in by 10:33. So that brings us to item 5.3. We're going to take this item and then break quickly for anybody who is wondering. So item 5.3, speed limit bylaw review statement of proposal. It's quite a lengthy recommendation in front of us that the Strategy and Policy Committee A, adopts the attached statement of proposal, proposed amendments to the speed limits bylaw 2019 for consultation. B, agrees to undertake consultation on the proposed changes to speed limits set out in the attached statement of proposal in accordance with the special consultative procedures set out in section 83 of the Local Government Act 2002. C, confirms that the submission period will last for a period of 6 weeks from 29th of June 2021 to 10th of August 2021. And D, authorises the Chief Executive to make any necessary minor drafting or presentation amendments to the attached statement of proposal and to approve the final design and layout of the documents prior to final printing and publication. Apologies for reading that, but we have been caught up with missing some parts of our recommendation lately. Do I have a mover for that, please?
I'll move.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. A seconder? Councillor Foy, thank you. Welcome. I will hand the floor to Darren. Thank you.
Thank you. Welcome, Sean. So we have Sean Baker here today from Transportation Alliance, who's going to speak to the report. So, Sean, thanks for making yourself available today, and the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. I just thought I'd very quickly, some of you have heard this recently at community boards, but just from a regional point of view, the speed limits, it's meant to be an ADB project, and we're doing high-risk roads and high-risk catchments first. So that's why the current review area for you covers the Kaitaia Road and that catchment area, because that's one of the last risk roads in Northland, and my understanding possibly the country. It's a very high risk. And in the process, while I was doing the background work for this, we had another fatality on that road. So it's people dying on the road, people getting seriously injured. The purpose of the review is why we're doing the review is to implement Road to Zero National Road Safety Strategy, which talks about setting the safe and appropriate speeds on our roads. So that's speed limits that match the road environment. And that's why you're seeing quite significant changes in speed limits. The aim of it is to reduce serious injury and fatal crashes. So that's basically what it comes down to. And it doesn't include state highways. In terms of the current review, which we're asking for approval to go out to consultation, the area has been split into essentially 4 categories: Kaitaia Awaroa, and Broadwood Kahukahu. So that sort of covers north of the Hokianga Harbour, west of State Highway 1, and south of Awanui, roughly. It also includes Marina urban area, and particularly Oturia Road, which is another high-risk road on that list. And the review also includes Te Araroa, Aotearoa, 90 Mile Beach. And the reason for including that in this review is as part of the implementation of the beach management plan. So the beach management plan has some action points in it, suggesting speed limits on the beach, and what we've done in this review is reflected those, because in order to make a review we still have to go through a specific consultation process. And I'll be up at the beach board on Friday to present on this whole review. We're proposing to notify on 29th of June, and we have a communication strategy which I'm actually meeting with Ken Lewis after this meeting. So the normal online, have you say, opportunity for submissions, and there'll be looking at drop-in sessions throughout the catchment areas, and obviously NTA staff will be, road safety staff members will be at those meetings. And I know that some of you are interested in where we're going with the whole speed limit review process. So the next area that we will be looking at is the Bay Islands Kerikeri area. So that sort of covers from Whangaroa Harbour through to the Bay Islands. Doesn't include Russell at this point, and the reason for that is because what we've done is put Russell in a review that will coincide with the Whangaroa District Council review of Tutakaka Coast goes on, because all those roads are connected. So we'll do those at that side of the Bay Islands with that. So Bay Islands Kerikeri, we're hoping to get that out at the end of this year. The Kawakawa Russell Road area, we're looking at doing that in 2022, coordinated with the WDC. I will say that the government is currently reviewing the setting of speed limits rule, so that will change, for example, how we deal with urban areas like Kerikeri. So those changes, we want to make sure that we can implement those changes, because it will make it a lot easier for us to do, because there's more tools to review urban areas, along with a variety of other issues. It will also change the way that that speed limits are undertaken, and will change take the bylaw into a national speed limit register. So yeah, questions?
Thank you, Sean. Really great overview of that. Councillor Stratford is the mover of this. Would you like to kick us off?
Certainly. So the whilst there is a little, bit of negativity about speed reductions out there, I just want to share that I've been working with a couple of communities on safer roads since 2014, and they really feel like they're invisible. So, they've got heavy trucks, lots of cars racing by, and they're on a local road with a primary school, and nobody goes 50 k's along their road. So I just want to highlight to anybody who's taken time to listen today, that the speed isn't just for you driving your car. The speed is also for the people that live in the houses or walk alongside the road or ride their bicycle alongside the road, or their horse for that matter, or walk their dog alongside the road. The speed reviews are for the people who've had to walk out from their house after they've heard yet again another car accident, and they've had to go and see and respond to those injured or dead people in a car accident. So I welcome the speed reviews, and I welcome everybody out in the public forum to get involved and have your say. Don't say, oh, it doesn't matter what we say about the speed reduction, they don't listen to us. That's not true. If you can give us good, information about why you think it should stay the speed it is, give it to us. But I'm hearing more, especially for Oteria Road, that they want their speed of 50 extended further past the marae to Pukapu Road, for example, but also hearing that they want the speed reduced further. So who knows where that conversation will lead, but I welcome everybody, and thank you, Sean, for all your work on this. And I'd love to do a pop-up in Moeroa, a couple of them, so get in touch. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Shepherd. Just before we enter into the debate, would anybody else have any questions of fact or information before we go down that road? Councillor Foy, and I see.
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Sean. I had a question, and I was lucky enough to be part of a presentation to the Pukapu Community Board at Karikari Peninsula, which also we had quite a few questions, and I know Adele's not here today. So it's good to see figure 9, which is the Te Oneroa Tohia map from the Beach Board Adopted Management Plan. I did question that at the Tuku Community Board, but I note, if you have a look at it, what page it's on online, is at the end of it where Ahipara, the blue line seems to end in an arbitrary location on that plan. And what I can foresee happening if we don't get a plan of Ahipara where exactly the speed limit's located on the different entrances and exits into the beach, where the main beach location is. And there's 3 entrances. There's Carter Street, there's Foreshore Road at Paripari, and then there's Te Kohanga. This plan here doesn't highlight those at all, and also the reference to the speed limits relate to legal beach access and the beach management plan. And so the question is, can we get a map of Paripara and which parts of the beach are included, this or not, specifically around the main areas that the public use?
So through the Chair, the Ahipara area is actually got its own map. We have mapped that as part of we've included that as part of the Kaitaia Awaroa mapping. So all of Ahipara is included within the speed limit review, in 11 areas. Perhaps the scale on that doesn't quite show it.
Thank you, Sean.
So certainly the key access ways to the beach will be included in this.
Thank you. We've got figure 3, Ahipara urban traffic.
Yes.
So that relates to the terrestrial portion of the speed limit review, not within the coastal marine area referred to in the beach management plan.
Yeah, so through the Chair, it's all combined effectively into one. What we've done is just separated those maps out a little bit. Initially, when we started doing this, we weren't necessarily looking at 90 Mile Beach, but we are now, so we've included that map. So yes, the accesses are included in this review, and we can make that clearer on the community engagement.
Yeah, I just think we need a map specifically that shows the actual beach and the entrances. For example, I'll give you one example. Te Kohanga and the access onto Te Kohanga is not included at all on any of these maps, or the road is not included either. Wreck Bay Road. So people will be asking that question. I can communicate that to you now. So if we could just include a map to reflect the beach areas and the roads, it could be aerial with Google.
Through the chair, that's relatively easy to do.
Yeah.
And we can include that in stuff that goes out.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Boyd. Councillor Tiffany.
Gilda, I've got quite a few, but I'll just chip through them if you can all bear with me. First off, I'm happy to see that we'll be going to our remote North Hokianga communities and making the roads safer there. I don't disagree that we need slower speed limits there. At the same time, I'm 30 years old and I've only ever seen a cop once out home in Mitimiti, and he was my uncle and he let us play with all his gadgets and put on his vest. So while we will be changing the speed limits to make it safer, you know, when it comes down to actually policing that, or is that actually going to make a difference? I note here that we've got community buy-in is extremely important. The buy-in here, when I go back to whānau, and I'm looking forward to going to the marae, and I hope you've got a good engagement plan, because it says in here that we need to directly engage with marae. Off the top of my head, there are 21 marae that I can count within the areas of the speed limit review. So when I go to the marae to talk to all my uncles who have been driving these roads for years, they'll say, oh, you can change it won't matter anyway. But I'll give you an example. If you travel from the Hokianga ferry to Mitimiti, right now there's only one speed limit change. That's from 100 k's to Panguru village, which is 50 k's. But under this, travelling from the Rangiora Narrows terminal of the ferry, you're going to go have 5 changes. So 100 to 80 to 40 to 80 to 60 to 40 just to get to my nana's house. So that's a common journey. If you think about journeys that people in these communities make, right? Now going from my nan's to Kaitaia, and Mitimiti to Kaitaia, which is another common journey that people that live in these communities do, it's also just a one speed change. That's Panguru village itself. But currently, now going back in reverse from my nan's to Kaitaia to do her shopping every fortnight, there are going to be 10 speed limit changes. So from 40 k's in Mitimiti to 60 k's up to the Panguru Long Bridge, to 80 k's from the Long Bridge to Panguru Village, 40 k's in Panguru Village, 60 k's along the Runaruna Road, 80 k's along Pawarenga Road, then back to 60 k's on Broadwood, then 80, 60, 80 along Kaitaia Awaroa. So when you think about these communities, when I read that statement about getting community buy-in, you know, and then I think about the journeys that people take, and like just the signs themselves, like we saw all those signs get smashed down just between here and Kirikiri, and that was only like 3 changes. Now we're going to 10 changes, and I know that there's no policing there, it's the Wild West, and I'm wondering how we get that buy-in when I know that my cousin's probably just going to ram it over in his truck and say, stupid council changing and don't mean shit. There's no cops here anyway, so that community buy-in is going to be extremely important. I don't have the answers here, but I'm just expressing my concerns in that space at this table. Going on those are just 2 journeys, just with journeys that I'm familiar with, so I know there are probably others. I'm very happy to help with marae consultation as well, by the way, just noting that there. The other thing I picked up in within this document that needs some attention are just some of the names are spelt wrong. So I know that when you go out for consultation, you say, look at this, and then it's my community, it's where I'm from, and I see that Runaruna Road is spelt Runarua Road. You can't even get the name right, but you want to ask me what I think about you changing the speed limit or changing things in my community, so we just need to fix those up, please. And that was just one of 2 that I picked up that were just spelling errors on the street names themselves that we'll have to fix before this goes out. And finally, I noticed, and my whānau are probably going to love this, but on page 80, the speed environments, where it talks about what environments are the reasoning for a set speed limit. Under 40 kilometres per hour, it says there, one of the bullet points, some very narrow or tortuous, unsealed access roads. That is a very emotive word. And when I looked up torturous, and I was like, is there another meaning for that? Characterised by involving or causing pain or suffering. So I thought, well, actually, yeah, that is right, because when we went to the Broadwood He Waka Ekenua long-term plan super consultation meeting, we got a letter from the principal of Te Kura o Matihe Mitimiti, where they had kids with bruising from donking their heads on the bus, the old bloody bus bars, because of all the corrugations on the road. So maybe that is right, but I just thought it was an extremely emotive word to be using in this consultation. Probably appropriately so. Sorry, there was one more thing. We're going out to all of these communities. One thing that I have raised in the past is the fact that we get data right on crashes, and it helps influence our decision making, and the fact that we need to change these. I also know of, off the top of my head over the years, like 5 crashes that were never reported. They were never reported because my cousins there, you don't have a warranted and a registered car, and you don't have insurance. So when you write off your car, your uncle comes with his tractor and tows it, and then it just sits there for the billy goat to play on, you know, like in the pad. But that data is not captured. So we discussed what is a way that we can capture all of that data as a council, so it can influence our decision making to say, man, that road, someone say there've been 10 crashes on there in the past 2 years. Well, actually there've been 30, just 20 haven't been reported. Is there a way that we as a council, and maybe this because we're going to ask these communities, can say, you know, we don't care about the legalities, usually it would feed through the police, but here, RFS that there has been a crash there on this day, and that way we can capture it. That was my question.
Okay, through the chair, I can answer quite a few of those questions.
Awesome.
I'll start with the easy ones. In terms of the term torturous, that is a term that is used essentially by Lokakotahi to describe a road that is very, very windy. So what they have is a road that's characterised as straight, curved, windy, tortuous, and standard definitions behind those. It's an engineering term, but having driven on a few of the roads in this review area, I would say torturous. Yes, it is torturous to the mind as well, and that's part of the reason why those sort of roads we need to look at as, you know, a road where it is unsealed and it is, you know, going all over the place, and there's a cliff face down to the side of you, and there's only room for 1.5 cars, should not have a speed limit of 100 kilometres. So that's that issue. In terms of enforcement, I agree with you 100%. You know, part of the issue, you know, compliance or what stops people speeding, is a very generalised comment, is the risk of getting caught and the consequences of getting caught. Because most people, when they drive, and I'm sure that every person around this table at the moment is the same, is you don't get into your car and say, okay, who am I going to kill today, or am I going to die today? You know, those are questions you don't ask when you get in your car. But for a lot of people, that's what happens. So most people drive to the conditions, but a lot of people don't, or some people don't, and that's part of the problem. So what we're trying to do is set these speed limits at what's the intuitive speed that you would normally be driving on the road. So what we do is we look at the operating speed of the road, and almost all of these roads that you're talking about, the operating speed, which is the speed that an average vehicle goes and travels at, is well below the posted speed limit. And what we find, Kaitai Awaroa Road, the the operating speed ranges between around about 60, 65 kilometres an hour up to about 80, 85. Very rarely does it get up to above that, and it certainly doesn't get to 100. Unsealed roads, a good unsealed road, typically the operating speed on that is between 50 and 60. So those are the speeds that people are going at. And so your uncles and cousins and other people, when they're driving, they'll think they're going really fast. But if they actually look at the speed limit, the actual speed limit, they're not necessarily going fast. So that's one issue. And what we've found is that all the research that has been done shows that if you bring the posted speed limit back to the speed, safely appropriate for the operating speed of the road, the top-end drivers will drop their speed. And they'll probably drop it without even thinking about it. And it's top-end drivers, if you drop that, you significantly reduce the risk of serious injury. The other issue is that these roads, the speed limit is not necessarily for the local person who drives that road every day. Because, you know, with the consultation I've done, I often get the comment of, oh, I drive on this road every day, I can do it at this speed, and I know how fast I can go, I don't need to be told. But particularly in this area, the Kaitaia road, sorry, I always get in trouble with that, is promoted very heavily as part of the Twin Coastal Discovery route. So you've got tourists, you've got, in normal times, you've got camper vans, and you've got a lot of people that drive up and down that road that have never driven it before. So if you have a 100k speed limit, they think that it's safe to go 100k. If you have a slower speed limit, they realise that this is a safe road. So they're looking at for guidance as to what is a safe and appropriate speed. So we can't change the number of police that are out there. But from what I see happening at a government level, they have changed, for example, one of the changes to setting speed limits is changing the speed cameras from being controlled by the police to being controlled by local government. And I think, and I may be speaking slightly out of turn here, but I believe that over the next 5 to 10 years, you are going to see more and more speed cameras on the roads. So that is the only option that you really realistically have when you don't have enough policemen. Because they're off chasing, you know, people, I guess. So that's that issue. In terms of engagement, we will be doing our best to engage as much as possible and hoping to directly notify all the Marina. We're currently working on where and when and how we go about actually having these drop-in sessions, because that's been quite successful in the past. And I'm sorry, I'm struggling to remember any other questions. The change in speed limits. So in terms of the change in speed limits, I agree that it does sometimes appear that way, and it does depend on what route you take to get from point A to point B. But what we've tried to do is be consistent in terms of what the road environment is. So if you're going from a long sealed section to a long unsealed section, when you go from a sealed to an unsealed, you would expect a change in speed limit. And that's, if you actually look at the road environment, you see that the changes are usually where there's a substantial change in environment. And going really, you've got sealed sections quite a long way. Then it goes to a solid unsealed section, which is a really good, relatively good unsealed road. And then when you get right out towards Liberty, you then enter what I would characterise as a very, very small but community area. There's houses, there's patches, there's people who live there, and the nature of that road is that the expectation is that people will walk all over the place, and there's not many cars or unexpected cars, so we would expect a slower speed limit for that community. If the community comes back and say they want something different, we will listen to them, but that's why it's been proposed that way.
I guess just highlighting and looking really quickly for our engagement on this, we are going out and engaging on changing the speed limits across an area of a huge area with communities with unsealed roads, and these communities are going to say, oh, okay, we're changing the speed limit, you're not fixing the road or sealing my road itself, so we need to be prepared with our matrices and all the mahi that council's doing in that space for that. I know we want community buy-in, but there's going to be community kickback with that.
Through the chair, all of the areas that we've reviewed so far includes significant unsealed roads, and by example, I'm just putting together a recommendations report for the Manawai Kaiwaka area, and just out of Manawai, they are very, very vocal about the unsealed roads. We get complaints about unsealed roads 2 or 3 times a week. We had a community engagement meeting where 30 people turned up, weren't interested in the speed limit, so just interested in seeing the road. Unfortunately, with this speed limit bylaw, we can't deal with several roads, it's outside scope of what we're doing. What we can say is that reducing the speed limit on an unsealed road reduces dust, reduces wear and tear on the road, so it has all those positive things. But you are correct that our roads, state highways, local roads are not in the best condition, and that's a function of funding being able to actually do that work.
Thank you, Sean. Just before I hand to Councillor Vucic, Darren just wanted to make a quick comment.
Thanks, Sean, for the detail. That's really, really important. It's really important, and Councillor Kenny touched on this, is the spelling of the place name, so making sure that a review of that doc before that goes out to consultation is really important.
Through the chair, I'm quite horrified that we found a couple of spelling mistakes in there, to be honest. But yeah.
I double checked to see if it was a different street. Like, it's like, oh, where's that? Oh no, that is the one I'm thinking of.
And in fact, through the chair, those spellings would have come through from our RAM database, because I get the road names and the current speed limit, and I just copy them straight across into my table. So and I just assume that they're correct. So there's actually an issue with the spelling. Well done, Trevor.
Councillor Tepelia, perhaps just for efficiencies, if you wouldn't mind sending those corrections through to Darren, just so
the whole, I would like a proper recheck, even if it was just Googling every single street name on here to make sure it's right. Because I only picked up the 2 because I'm from that community. So that was Runaruna, which is Runarua on here, and Panguru, which is Pungaru on this document. So.
Thank you, Councillor Tepelia. Councillor Vucic.
Yeah, just be very quick. I think, Sean, you've actually answered one of the questions. I was wondering why you were concentrating on those rural roads, but you've said it, and which we actually knew, and that is the high-risk roads. But just what I have is a quick question. I'll just skip some of this. One, there is actually a national standard for roads and how they fit in. And I presume therefore there's a national, expected sort of national standard for speed limits on similar roads. What I expect will actually occur here, and this question's coming, is that the national standard for the roads and the posted speed limits that you would expect are going to be a lot less, and that just reflects the torturous nature of the roads and injury of kids travelling in buses, and also risk to health. But one of the things I'm concerned about is the overall cost to those communities now, because when you look at the posted speed times, and they'll go into your Google things and so on, and they'll look at that, and then they'll think, well, that's going to take too long, we won't go that way, we'll go another way. Or the trucks now may be travelling slow, I don't know, maybe they already are, as you said. But what it will highlight is the overall cost to the industry in these areas which are producing the majority of our exports out of the north, namely trees and everything else. So is that going to change? There's a question, is that going to change the business case for sealing or improving the roads? Because I agree, local people drive on their roads and they do not like the state of the roads. So will there be a greater argument with the dropping in speed limit, looking at it differently, to show that there is in fact a good case for improving our roads?
Through the chair, I'm perhaps not the best person to be able to answer that in any detail. And unfortunately, my colleague that would be able to answer is not here. My feeling is that, I mean, for a start off, is that part of the requirements is that we need to aim to set speed limits to within about 10% of.
Well, maybe, Madam Chair, it is slightly aside. Maybe that can be done offline because I'd like that answer. So just second thing, then second question is the you mentioned urban traffic, and what concerns me is, say, generally a sealed road at 80 k's won't be at 80 k's, even though some of them are, because it's not sealed. So I'm just wondering in your definition of urban, because a lot of we don't have much actual definition of urban space, and I agree, 50 or 40 in an urban area is fine, but a lot of our areas where are actually not defined as being urban. Is there a definition that you're using for here, urban, based on a perception, or is there actual, this is an urban area?
Through the chair, the current bylaw already has what's called urban traffic areas, which are identified as areas where people live, and so that's part of the definition. But also what we look at is the number of intersections, the number of accesses onto the road. So the higher that becomes, and within the technical report it actually provides, I can't remember the number, but basically if you're getting up to between 10 and 20 accesses per kilometre, then you're looking at an urban area, or greater than 20, I think it is, I can't remember the exact number. So we define that within the technical report, which will also be on the website. And there's I think the technical report for the Waitangi North speed review is already on the website, so if you want to have a look at it before it gets up there, then you're welcome to.
So there are places that have hundreds of accesses and they're not urban, when you get the forest trucks.
Yeah, I'm talking about like residential accesses. So you're looking at the density and what the road is effectively used for. So you might get, for example, if you look at Broadwood, it's a low density area, but there's a petrol station, there's a Foursquare shop, there's a school, there's other, there's houses around there, so it becomes a more urbanised area. It's perhaps not in the same vein as what you're taking from a planning document, but from a roading perspective, it is more of an urban area.
Thank you, Sean. Councillor Research, perhaps if you've got any further questions, take them offline. Thank you. Councillor Collard, did you have your hand?
Yes, I wanted to endorse what my colleague Councillor Tierney said in relation to the Kaitaia Aurora, Miti, that general area, Broadwood, etc. I travel through there quite often. My mother-in-law lives out there, so I do have to go out there from time to time. And I asked the same question. Changing the speed limits, what difference will it make? Because I don't really see a hell of a lot of that. Yesterday I was on the Kaitaia Aurora Road, it was a 70k area, then goes into 100, and I was still on the 70, and I got passed by one car, and I was doing the 70, so he was doing a hell of a lot more than me, and I got on to 100 and got passed by two more. Locals, definitely, but going from that, my question is, we have got to make a difference, and it will go further than that. I also noticed Night Mile Beach is on here, wide open spaces, low tide and dead flat. The speed limit there is 100, but probably you're catching it, you would, if you were there, catching it 130, 140, because of the nature of what it is and the fact that people, not only locals, all sorts of people, and probably each one's major problem in terms of getting the mindset, and it would be interesting to know how that will be policed. I get around the access areas like Carter Street, Waikato around the area, there's people around there and it's obvious that they need to slow down. But elsewhere, it's just wide open. It's like the racetrack from hell.
Through the chair, since we did the signage went up at on Waimea North review area, I drive that area reasonably regularly, and since the signage has been going up, I've visited there periodically, and I have noticed a significant drop in speed limit of drivers going fast through there. So we are getting, and this is just purely anecdotal, but anecdotally, you are getting reasonable compliance. You're still going to get people that don't comply. That's for real. The difference is if you're doing 120 in an 80k zone, and if you get caught, which is another issue, you lose your licence, and you usually get your car taken off you for a few days or something like that. So the penalties are higher, and we have to start somewhere. I don't know of any council in the north that have got the funding to be able to upgrade their roads to 100k standard, and that's part of the issue.
Thank you, Sean. That's a powerful statement right there. Member Ward.
Yes, not a question, Madam Chair. I'll keep it quick. Just a lesson learned in relation to the Marina urban area. It was a classic marriage made in heaven when you came and presented to us, Sean, at the community board meeting. We had our footpath matrix priority list. Both came together in June. Just was like, it just doesn't happen for me like this, but it did. And we were able to actually make a difference to a community, particularly Taumata Makuku settlement area, by bringing a footpath to the top of the list and saying, right, we're going to make this road to zero here in this neighbourhood and make a difference to this neighbourhood. They'd moved their school bus shelter. It was high priority on your speed zone list to change it. And so we threw all our footpath budget at it, and we had residents come and address us at the board. And I just want to tell the council and NGA that when you work together and we hit the same things together, particularly those urban area changes, we can make huge differences when we work together and when we get the timing right. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Queen.
Thank you.
Apologies.
Yeah, no questions, particularly just some very quick comments. We are voting or not on a consultation strategy, and I'll never vote against that. I confess to some scepticism about the whole road to zero model. It's an important model from countries that are utterly different from us in terms of their infrastructure, their social attitudes, just about everything imaginable. I've driven in Norway and Finland, and it's a whole different planet than Northland, I assure you, as I'm sure others of you know. A lot of these changes will be purely nominal. Quite a lot of these roads, currently 100k limit. Nobody in their right mind would do 100k, and if you did, you'd know, because you would run off the road. They're little short, twisty metal roads. That's not a bad thing. I'll take your point. It may just give strangers to the area a bit of a heads up that they're entering into a zone which is potentially challenging or dangerous. Hearing the conversation, I keep going back to we used to talk about the 3 E's of education, engineering and enforcement in that order. And I stick with that. I think if we educate our drivers better, we don't invest in driver training enough nationally. We don't invest in attitude training about driving very much. Engineering is falling, as we know. Our funding model is completely broken, both locally and indeed, this Thursday, anniversary, 11 calendar months since Mangamuka broke, since State Highway 1 was broken. Well, how is that acceptable? 11 months, it'll be a year before the thing reopens. That just indicates that the funding model and the approach to road maintenance is completely out the window. and then enforcement, which should be the last thing on the hierarchy, and even that's not very evident. I suspect that a lot of this changes won't have a practical difference, sadly, for all the reasons of law course. So engagingly expressed, most people will drive to the conditions because that's the way you don't have a crash, and others won't, and we'll see what the outcome of that is. You mentioned speed cameras, and perhaps I'm cynical, but it seems to me speed cameras are most often encountered on long straight roads where there are passing lanes. People having diligently not passed dangerously on the twisty roads get into them, and then they get penalised if they do sneak over the limit to get past a truck or some slow vehicles. But I won't get into too much of a rant, but as I say, the recommendation is about consultation, and I do think we're going to cop it left, right and centre about why you messing about with speed limits rather than investing in the roads. And the fact is, of course, we simply don't have the funding to even begin. I do wonder, finally, if there would be a case made to get this main Awaroa Road handed over as a state highway in the way that Mangakahia Road was a few years ago. It is, given that NZTA seem incapable of keeping two state highways open, maybe giving them a third option, that might be a way to get some improvements on that road, certainly on the main link, if you like, from through to, as an alternative route through to the far north, through the Kaitaia. I'll leave it there, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fendon. Do I have any further comments or questions? No, I just had a couple, Sean. I noted here that the next steps were outlined in terms of the consultation dates. I'm just really keen to get an understanding of when the next governance touch point would be and when we might expect that next tranche of reporting to come back to us.
So typically what we do is we'll have the hearings required because we're under the Government Act required to give people opportunities to present their views to council. So once we are well through the submission period, we'll determine whether we need hearings and get that into set a date that's fairly close to the hearings. Then let's take a bit of time because we have to analyse everything, prepare a recommendations report and come back to council on that to adopt those changes of the speed limit in principle before we go to the actual legal process of actually legalising, because there's a gap between approving the speed limits in principle and actually getting speed limit signs up. And what we are experiencing at the moment is very, very slow procurement, which we experienced at the Waimahi Road. So it takes some time. Excuse me. And at the same time, there's changes to the speed limits bylaw and things like that that's going to be going on in the background. So next touch point is the hearings. Hopefully, maybe a month after.
Thank you. Just signalling there's some fantastic work going on in the bylaw space at the moment, but what I don't want to see from a committee point of view is a funnel where all of a sudden we have a bunch of hearings and a bunch of consultation, a bunch of everything going on all at once. So just really keen to make sure that we stagger those going forward for the committee so that we can still get this nice, solid, robust conversation at a committee level. Sean, the only other question I had was following a lot of the signs in the Waimahi area being knocked down, there were a lot of suggestions from the public that council should be considering painting the speed limits on the roads, acknowledging a lot of these roads are more rural gravel roads, so that is not an option. I was just wondering if you had any response to that going into this.
Okay, legally we have to have the signs up there as they are. There's legal standards, including the positioning of the sign. They're going to be plus or minus 20 metres from the actual junction speed limit, and certain dimensions, colours, all that sort of thing. However, there is additional physical works that we want to undertake to reinforce those speed limits, which is such as painting on the roads, some physical works in terms of threshold treatment, things like that. Funding, we need to make sure that the funding is in there. So the current decision, get the signage up, get the legal side of it done, then we do
Thank you, Sean. If I've got no further comments or questions, I did promise you a break 20 minutes ago, so I will put this to the vote at this point. I'm also not going to reread the recommendation. It has been moved by Councillor Stratford, seconded by Councillor Foy. All in favour of the recommendation? Abstain. Those against? No. We have it in front of us. Councillor Court is abstaining, and that is carried. So on that note, I'm going to break us for a 10-minute lunch break. Sean, thank you for that report. See you all back here at 11:31. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you. Back into the agenda, item 6.1, navigating our course engagement debrief. The recommendation in front of us is that the Strategy and Policy Committee receive the report navigating our course engagement debrief. Do I have a mover for this, please? Councillor Usage, Councillor Clinton. Thank you. Darren, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thanks very much, through the Chair. Catherine Langford, who is our engagement lead has joined us to talk to the report and to take any questions. It's always important that we review the work we're doing, and I come back to the earlier point in discussion about how we engage this consultation look like and the lines of communication. It's really important to understand where we currently are and how we can improve. So, Catherine, welcome.
Sure, thank you. Thanks, everybody. As Darren said, the purpose of this report is about capturing a record of what we did with a pretty challenging consultation, and then hopefully learning from that, and so that we can take the good lessons through to future consultations, and also understand where our weaknesses are, where the vulnerabilities are. I think it's sort of an unprecedented situation navigating our course. We had 4 big projects that were all sort of coinciding, and we knew we had to deal with them in a very tight time frame, and so hence bringing everything into one big engagement program. It presented an awesome opportunity because it meant that we could really throw everything up in the air and sort of preempt a shift in how we engage in council. It was also an opportunity for the engagement team, which is a relatively new team, to sort of show their hand a little bit and to say how we think we can work with the organisation to support engagement going into the future. I think there were some great strengths to the consultation process, to that month. But there are also some key items in here which I pulled out as considerations that I would like us to be able to explore within the engagement team, within SPP, and then as a wider organisation. And so for now, it's just tabling that to give everyone the opportunity to think it through, and then maybe we can start to sharpen the pencil around certain areas to see how we might change things in the future. I was listening in to the item before, and what's really clear is that the way we engage with our communities is becoming more and more important in our as a local government. There is an expectation, both internally and externally, that there is that active participation and some influences on decision making, and so we need to get a better understanding of what that looks like and how we can manage it to the benefit for all of us. So I'm open to your questions.
Thank you, Catherine, for that great opening statement. Councillor Usage, would you like to kick us off?
Yep, thank you. Certainly, I'd be very keen. I know it's difficult when you've been able to so many things to engage, but it does highlight, I believe, some of the issues we are facing. And I'm actually wondering, as I raised before, whether we can look at a method such as that involves the continuous engagement process.
Yeah.
And we have community boards, for example, that talk regularly to their communities, and if we get greater participation around the table in various ways, then bringing through the community boards, I'm trying to suspect bringing some of the material in front of people in those communities would potentially help with it being captured. I'm also talking about the community plans also being captured and coming through as part of that engagement. And then maybe going out to other places such as Marina, because I realise that sitting in some of these major centres and saying, here it is, putting the hand up often because people are busy, but I was surprised at how many people didn't really know what was going on in the comments they got back. Some way so comment on that.
So the idea of a sort of a rolling engagement program that makes the most of existing channels that we have, so community boards is absolutely a great place to be starting, because we know that there's a real close connection with the communities there. So I'd be really interested in exploring how we can make better use of that interface. That was something that kept coming up as we were going around the district. That kept popping up saying we need to be doing this all the time. So we're actually working on a case quietly behind the scenes for how a sort of rolling engagement might look, what facility, what tools we need, what equipment, what resourcing, and so that we can start to shape a rolling program that could sit alongside then the work of the community boards. That means that we have the potential to deal with speed limits, vehicles on beaches, and some of the wastewater treatment consent renewals that we're doing right now. If we can combine those and we can make it the regular thing, that people get used to us bringing those issues to either community boards or to some kind of timetable program in each area of the district, I think that would be great. So we're working on that in the background.
Thank you, Councillor Vucic. Councillor Clinton?
Thank you. Yeah, just first to acknowledge, I seem to recall the workshops before you launched into this marathon consultation. Staff were telling us we can do that, and I think there were some fingers crossed behind banners when you said that. So well done, it got there, and it was largely successful, and we've learned a lot, and so good on you. A couple of points from the report. Page 110, consideration that information on funding next LTP should be organised by town and ward as well as by activity, and I think that's an excellent idea, not only for the communities but actually for us as well, to get a better sense of what is being spent or proposed in a particular area as well as activity, because as we know, trawling through those endless spreadsheets is not sort of a favoured activity. And the in-principle policy to always think how can we engage directly with people as well as or instead of other forms. I think those are two very worthwhile propositions. You make the point about the value of staff working with each other where they might not otherwise. And I'd add there was real value, I think, for us as councillors to be at those various events with staff, a chance to just chat sort of informally. Obviously, you inevitably talk shop, but I think there was real value in that, I think, in terms of relationship building. And I understand we need to keep a degree of separation on occasion, but I think as human beings, it's really powerful if we can have those shared activities. And the other comment, consideration on page 112 to activate in the Strategic Partners Relationship Register. I think our chair will agree that we've been quite keen to get a handle around that, like probably for the last 12 months or so. We have seen what I would call errors in terms of particular parties in the community not being engaged with and other groups having been engaged about particular issues where there was no relevance to them. So I'd love us to get real about that, for the committee to get a look at that register, maybe update it, think hard about it, how it's organised and managed, and to actually make it a bit real. So again, I very heartily endorse that proposition there, because I think it's something that's been lacking. And we are sort of tripping ourselves up on occasion. I won't dwell on some examples, but there have been those where people have felt left out through no ill will, but simply because we haven't joined the dots in terms of who we should be talking to about particular issues particularly well. So yeah, generally well done, and thanks for a good report.
Thank you, Councillor Clinton. Before I go to Councillor Tiffany, Mr Taylor, did you want to make comment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I could just begin by echoing Councillor Clinton's comments about fingers crossed. As the General Manager going in there, and Sean watching my every move carefully, when this proposal was rolled out, I have to say I thought, are we taking on more than we can deal with? Because I've never seen 4 strands of consultation be done at one time. What I've got to say, and it's a huge credit to Catherine, Anna, and all the team across the council who were involved, members and officers alike, that we pulled it off. My abiding memory will be, I talked to Sean about this one yesterday, was at Rawani, when Sean came into the meeting, and it was a hot atmosphere. But between Councillor Vucic and Sean, they ended up standing literally shoulder to shoulder. And what we got at the end of the meeting was a lot more light than heat. And what we actually discovered was that the big asks weren't actually that big, and that they were genuinely deliverable. So I think we got an awful lot from this. And my last comment would be this, Chair, that as we look forward, as we stand at the crossroads of significant change in this nation and local government, the well-beings will be delivered on the back of this sort of work. This is really groundbreaking and hugely important stuff, and well done to all the staff and members involved.
Thank you, Councillor Tiffany.
Sure, thank you, Madam Chair. I really wanted to thank you so much for this entire project, and I got to be more intimately involved. Unfortunately, you do have to minus 1,000 viewers from there because it was my nana watching videos on TV because she's so proud of me, watching her book all on the video. But I really appreciated the attitude that you and the fellow staff members that were with you and the team had in being reactive when you needed to be, being proactive, but throughout that whole process, and it was highly stressful, but that never leaked out from you or from your staff. I was like, oh, can you please do this? Like, yeah, cool. But just I think that the success of it overall, and I know that there are learnings and that's come through here, which is great to see, but overall, I truly believe it was a huge success. I love your conclusion, never stop learning. We can only learn from that going forward. I did have a couple of things though, and this is probably for the table as a whole that I wanted to highlight that are within this report. One of them, and this is actually nothing to do with this, but more around our culture as a council, or the terminology we use, and under cross-organisation collaboration on page 108. One of the great things was full collaboration of Tier 3 managers. And this is something that's been sitting funny with me, is how we refer to different people across our organisation by the tier they're on. And I don't know if that's okay or not, and I don't know how to feel about that. At Kura, I don't refer to myself as a Tier 2 person in my school's organisation, or that teachers at Tier 3 or Tier 4. I don't refer to myself as a Tier 3 counsellor. So I don't know if that's okay, and it's spoken quite a bit, but this is the first time I've seen it actually in written form, and I don't know how to feel about that, or if it does have something with it, or if it doesn't, or if I'm reading too much into this. But you know, I just wanted to place that here for us to chew on for a bit there, and I'm happy to have kōrero later on about it. But it's just something that's been sitting funny with my ears, and then I finally saw it in written form. I was like, I think I need to say something about that, so I'm taking that opportunity. That's nothing to do with the report, of course, Kat. And the final thing, which obviously pūkana at me within this report, is that furthermore, cultural competency in many areas of council is low. Those who have an inclination to participate in community engagement aren't necessarily the ones best equipped with understanding of tikanga Māori, and this left staff feeling vulnerable and communities feeling we're not making the effort to engage on their terms, and that's huge. That's a huge concern for me, one that I want to see us address or continue to address, because it's an ongoing thing, but I don't know how we're going to do that. The consideration here is that we build our Māori tikanga Māori competency programs into our staff training options. Never assume digital will suffice. I know that we've got this flash as Whānau District Council app on tikanga Māori. It's got mihi and waiata and the names of the different marae in our district there. I don't know if that's actually compulsive part of your induction program into our organisation, or how many downloads it's had, or stats on it, or how much it costs, because it's something that's happened before. But I would like to see that happen. I know that myself and Councillor Smith have used councils in Scipio, Perception 7 or whatever it's called program, and it's great. It's got some great professional development in there from the lady with the American voice, and you put her on fast and speed through it and try not to talk like her afterwards. So I want probably maybe an answer to that. How are we going to capture this or going forward? Because when I see that staff are feeling vulnerable, that's a huge concern.
Thank you, Councillor Tiffany. Before I go to Councillor Foy, Mr. Clark, would you like to respond to that in any way?
Well, the chairman, I've been talking about Te Hono, and he'll be getting some plans together in his head by now, but maybe he should have Mr. Craig in the hero with you.
Absolutely.
Sure. Thanks, Sean. Through you, Madam some really good points. We talked about how we look at developing ourselves yesterday in catch up. And if I can touch especially the tier 3 comment, that is a very council jargon type term. We refer to managers as people leaders, and that's probably a better way of describing how we want to see ourselves. So take on board that point. How do we build confidence and competence into us not just as an organisation, but personally? And Sean and I have been talking and have been reflecting in week 4 of coming back to Far North District Council, the improvements that we've made, looking at where I've recently been, and the advantages and opportunities that present for further exploring that. And I'm looking to do that in the coming weeks and months. So if I could leave you with that I hear the voice loud and clear, and the challenges there for being able to work with our teams and move across council with the general managers. That's
Councillor Foy.
Thank you, and thank you. In particular to you, I think I just wanted to acknowledge how far we've come in this space, and it seems like it's all changed sort of the recent events, and hopefully coinciding with some amazing team members joining our organisation and COVID. But I wanted to support the investment they've had in technology, and I think we can do better in that space as well, not just in Kaipiki. We've got other areas in a big, huge geographic area to represent, and the fact that we do most of our meetings here is probably not representative of those that necessarily would be engaged. So we usually only get certain people physically come to the meeting, and if we provided for technology in other areas, we might get better engagement from our community. In that respect, we set up satellite areas using technology, and also we're utilising the fibre that we've got available in our rollouts, which is exciting for us. I liked the report here, and it talked about the engagement timeframes, and that during the time that they visited the council's website, that it was 3 minutes. So I guess it really highlights to the staff and on significant issues how much time we've got to engage with people and sort of what they're looking for. And when we're moving into the space for our next item on the agenda, the district plan, and sort of what might be relevant to the everyday person, I think that's important that we can relate and use social media, for example, to highlight particular areas when it's quite technical. And people aren't necessarily aware of things, which is really, vividly present last Friday, when people, are really angry that they weren't aware of this, and we're sneaking it through. And elected members, I think you'll be aware now that you are the faces of the district plan, as individuals that get put up the front in front of 2,000 angry people. So I think as staff that work there, that have health and safety policies that protect them, that don't necessarily extend to elected members, that was quite awakening to myself as an elected member, and that we are the face of all of these rules that we supposedly need to enforce. So I just wanted to highlight that in terms of our engagement, and maybe using that for a lot of messages so that people can be more aware, and we can pass that around and hopefully not spend too much money and get a lot of bang for our buck with using technology.
Thank you, Councillor Foy, and that crosses nicely into our next report as well. Did I have any further comments or questions? I just had a couple. Thank you, Catherine. Along a similar lines of what Councillor Tipene has also raised, so I'll keep it brief, but I wanted to acknowledge the team and the fact that you so willingly put yourselves out there day after day. And we all know it is not a nice space to be engaged in a lot of the time. But what comes with putting ourselves out there is that we also get those really nice moments that make it worth it as well. So really just wanted to acknowledge the willingness there. As members of the Young Elected Member Network, we get the benefit of having bragging rights across the country, and when our video went live, we were famous throughout the network as a council, and I know a lot of other councils have looked to the work that you've done in this space and the number of submissions that we receive. Acknowledgement, I think, of that. We can always get more, and that goes to that final point of always learning, never stop learning, but I just wanted to acknowledge how phenomenally leading we were in this space this time around, and that came down to the hard work of you guys. I support all of the considerations in this report, and I would love to see them all come to life, but that's at an operational level, so I look forward to see how those improvements are made right across the board, especially as Councillor Foy has raised with our district plan coming up, and making sure that we do that mahi justice. There was one thing that I wanted to point out though. On page 109, we talked about confusing the public, and I think something that I heard was the confusion of consultation versus engagement, and when we wrapped those 4 pieces of work together, they were all consultation, so I think it has confused a few members of the public as to what they're making formal submissions on versus what they are just having their voice heard, and perhaps that's a piece of learning that we can take forward as to how we address that through our significance and engagement policy. And finally, I just wanted to acknowledge again on that last page the never stop learning. I look forward to seeing you guys continue to break down the silos and to encourage the place-based planning through that never stop learning. So thank you so much for all of that, Mahi. And on that note, I will put this report to the vote. The recommendation in front of us that the Strategy and Policy Committee received the report Navigating Our Course Engagement Debrief, moved by Councillor Vucic, seconded by Councillor Clendon. All in favour? Aye. Those against? No? Carried. Thank you, Kat. Last but not least, team, so we have 35 minutes to crack through this. I've tried not to exercise standing orders, but I feel like this might be a bit of a hefty item, so please just be mindful of our 12:30 finish before we move into the rest of the day's work. So on that note, item 6.2, update on draft district plan engagement recommendation that the Strategy and Policy Committee received the report update on draft district plan engagement. Do I have a mover for that, please? Thank you, Councillor Stratford. Seconder?
Yeah, maybe.
Councillor Vucic, thank you. Darren, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I take the words that Councillor Foy alluded to earlier, and what we saw Friday with the court, which for my mind, and taken from what the CEO comments on frequently, is democracy in action, where the voice of the community is being heard and is being heard loudly. And so it's really timely that today we have a report which provides an update on the district plan, how it's travelling, noting that the district plan and the review is not new or unique to us. It is something that we have been doing for several years now. And it's really starting to become quite topical. We've seen it recently. So what I'd like to do is invite Craig Wilson up to the podium, who has really lived and breathed the district plan that we draft and review for the last 5 years, to give us an overview, perhaps look at where the unsettled waters may lie, as we already know, and look at how we traverse those waters. So, Greg, thanks very much, and welcome on.
Thanks, Darren, and through the chair, Madam Chair. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to this update. It's a snapshot in time on a piece of work that has been developed over a number of years and still sits in a draft space. So we really respect the community participation in the plan making process. And I also say we really respect and value the support that our elected members have provided for the team in the making of the district plan and how they've helped us in our engagement process. It's really valued. As Darren outlined, this has been a piece of work that's been developed over a number of years. In fact, we started this in 2016 with Let's Plan Together, which was an acknowledgement that we need to make a consolidated review of our district plan. And we had an open discussion with our communities about how we broach the issues and develop a framework for making a new district plan responsive to new sustainable management issues. So we moved around our community back then. In fact, we're acknowledged, we won a couple of awards for that engagement process, which was nice, but it wasn't, it wasn't the purpose. We wanted to basically get that process happening. Now that led to the development of the draft policy framework. That was developed and shared with our communities in 2018, November and December, through to 2019. And we took to our communities basically the essence of what the district plan's strategic direction was, but it didn't have maps, and it didn't have the full law framework, but it did contain how our significant resource management issues. Here's the big problems that we have, and here's how we seek to address them. So within those significant resource management issues was Indigenous biodiversity, and it did identify that this is an issue that we need to address. We need to map it and have rules. In fact, we had a rule framework there that was more restrictive than what we have at the moment. Excuse me, I'll just grab that. So there's the draft policy framework there. So we received feedback on that draft policy framework, and that fed into spatial planning, what the lines on the maps would look like to deliver this policy direction. And that has been underway since 2019. In fact, we were supposed to go and engage on significant natural areas in 2020. But due to COVID, that was not available to us. We couldn't go and talk to our communities face to face. We couldn't have ecologists go on site. And so the model that we arrived at was we will continue with the draft district plan and then do further engagement once we've shown how everything works together. Here's how the plan can work as an integrated, consolidated product that responds to the new national planning standards, delivers on our significant resource management issues, and then we continue that discussion with our communities. And as you heard from Catchments before, we were part of that roadshow approach. That roadshow that actually took from the seeds of our 2018, 2019 roadshows, where we had 13 engagements across the district. Now, every ratepayer received advice about the draft district plan in March, as they did about the draft policy framework in 2018 and 2019. We understand, though, that we've moved from general policy direction to more specific. It's a long process. And as you move through that process, the information, the direction about how this looks on the ground becomes more specific. And that's when perhaps there's another level of detail and involvement that is encouraged. And in that sense, it's really good that we're having this discussion with our communities right now, because you can see how that policy framework resonates on the ground. And it's in a draft space. We haven't landed this. So we get this information and we put it into the next steps. And what you have in the appendix today is a summary of those key indicators or key feedback pieces of information for each of the 9 significant resource management issues. So this is an active space. Some issues we've heard strong feedback on. That's pretty obvious. The significant natural areas has resonated strongly. That's not a surprise. It was always a challenge. There was a legacy with that issue 20 years ago. The wheels turned. We're back in that space again. We've been advising everybody about this issue for a couple of years now. There's other issues that are also challenging for our community, for example, heritage areas. So we're doing some further targeted engagement on that matter as well, so that we can learn from the feedback, make sure that our plan in this draft space is better positioned to respond not just to the resource management issues, but our community's preferences. The intention is then to put it into a proposed district plan, which sets the ball rolling for a statutory participation process. Again, the community is invited to participate with submissions, further submissions, participate in hearings, participate in the feedback from council's decisions where then appeals can be lodged. So it's a very deliberative participatory process. Right now, we're in this space which is quite rich and involving, and that's a draft space. So what we're hearing is really strong and really valuable. We really appreciate that. But it's quite active as well. So, in terms of next steps, our team will be looking at that feedback in more detail. We'll be undertaking some further targeted engagement on heritage areas. And we'll be talking again with our elected members about the steps in developing to a proposed district plan, some of those strategic issues that we need to consider to make sure that it's fit for purpose for our community before we go to that next proposed stage. I'd be happy to assist with any questions.
Thank you, Greg. That's a great opening statement. Councillor Stratford, would you like to kick us off?
Yes, I will kick off by saying how I found the district plan engagement during,
navigating our course.
Navigating our course was really awesome. I really enjoyed being able to see the public come in and, pick you guys' brains and get down into the detail. And I'm really enjoying the online version of the draft district plan. I think it would be really helpful if we did a little webinar showing people how to use it, because I think there's even some elected members that could use that too.
You didn't look at me when you said
that. My bad, I might have. I don't have control over that. But I just want to say, I know that there are some community organisations out there that are waiting for the, instead of doing a plan change, they're waiting for this proposed district plan. So, although we've got to find a way through our significant resource management issues, we still need to work on the district plan. Yeah, and I just commend you, Greg. I've been out on the, the tracks with you in a few places, and I really take my hat off to you being so calm. You've taken a lot of aggression out there from the public, and it's a lot of it's been, really inappropriate, and you didn't react back, and I just commend you for that, and your staff. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford. Councillor Visa.
Yep. Let me say, Greg, thank you. I know you've got a very difficult task in front of you. And look, there are things there that you've done I really do appreciate. For example, the district plan being digital, available in digital format. Going forward, you've got far more detail, and you can capture, from community plans, aspirations, and this continuous engagement. I'd love to see. That's a good way of actually getting all that in there too. So that's good that technology is available. I'm aware that there are many people that don't necessarily have to be online, but again, there's not, if you go out into the community, there's ways you can take technology with you and then make it available. And it's really, and I've seen there been sessions where people are looking at that and looking at their properties, and it's quite, quite captivating. But just getting back to more, so great. Look, and another general statement, we have to have a district plan, and it's to get down to community level. So I'm a little bit concerned with the government saying, oh, we're only going to have 17 or whatever of these nationally and everything will be good. I think that's in dreamland. And the recent event sort of improves that. And also likewise, it's a lesson. So I think one of the lessons learned out of all this, one is you don't go and make high-level policies, statements or nice-sounding statements without giving consideration to how it's going to be worked out. Because that's where it all happens. And unfortunately, that comes down to us or to local community who are fronting all of that and how to actually work that out. So if you can imagine a circle, I'd actually love to see an approach that's taken where you may have a draft, you've got original thinking, you can't work it out throughout New Zealand in all detail, so let's get right down to the low level and let's look at, say, some key areas and what does it look like. Then it goes back around, how do we modify that? So you have a bit of a continuous process there and spend the time on that before you go and hit, have consequences that are opposite of what you want to achieve. How many people have said they're going to be cutting down trees and made me think, oh, I don't think that's going to look too good. So you see what I mean? So, and I'd love to see that being done. And it's a lesson for central government, it's a lesson for NRC, it's a lesson for council in that area, but also how important it is in those to get right down at your grassroots level for the owners, where it all happens in your small communities at the mana whenua level, hapu level, and engage them as early as possible in that process. But look, I know you've had a hard job there, and there are things that we can learn out of all this, and let's apply it.
Thank you, Councillor Fusich. Councillor Boyd, did you want to go at this point?
I'm listening to all of the lectures.
Fantastic, thank you. Councillor Cleandon.
Saving the best to last, I'm sure. Yeah, just to pick up on one comment Councillor Fusich made about this is probably one of the most important district plans ever, because it's probably going to be the last one ever. The language last week at the LGNZ Rural Provincial Conference from MFE officials was the challenge ahead of us, massaging all of the district plans into these combined plans. And I thought that was really interesting language. So I encourage you to design your plan to be massaged gently into, so I have no idea what that means, quite seriously. But I think it's going to be a very difficult time. The sort of stronger, the more compelling we can make the essence of this plan better. Because a lot of the detail will invariably be lost, I suspect. It's going to be a very tricky time ahead. Some of the specifics I pick up, there is a Section 31 requirement, as you say, to ensure the supply of zoned land and infrastructure. And that's absolutely true. And I know there's pressure both for intensification and for further subdivision. Developers love subdividing, that's how they make money, and good on them. But equally, the rezoning is relatively easy. It's the infrastructure which keeps me awake at night, if anything. I think we're in a situation now where we're still trying to backfill infrastructure which has been lagging behind development. And we've really got to break that cycle. We've got to get ahead of it, or else we're going to constantly be running just to go backwards, let alone stay in one place. So I think it's a significant challenge for the final draft document. The digital format, the e-plan, very powerful, very flexible, very compelling, and quite a mystery to a lot of people, I fear. I've seen people who are computer literate, engaged, motivated, really struggling to get into the thing, particularly if you've got a relatively slow connection or a computer that isn't state of the art. So I do think we need to be able to take that, as was suggested, get the technology out there, and the idea of some online instruction through it, because it is complicated. Once you play with it long enough, you'll get there. But we have to consider how much motivation people have. We want their feedback, but if they have to kind of self-instruct them on how to use this new technology, I think we'll lose an awful lot of them. Another comment, 117. What did I find compelling there? Oh yes, a plug-in, obviously, for my never miss an opportunity. Active transport modes is something I think we need to engage with a lot more. I know Councillor Court's dying for an opportunity to ride her bicycle around Kitty Kitty. Leave the V8 at home. Seriously, it is a big part, I believe, of our overall solution to some of the congestion and connectivity issues in our urban areas. And I do think we can achieve a lot of it relatively cheaply. I don't think it has to be massive investment to achieve some of that. Final thing I'll mention is heritage. I don't think it's very interesting that one area is desperately trying to beat heritage protection away and another area is saying give us more of it. So just pick the bones out of that one with you. I do think there's a case where people's obliged to jump through extra hoops to make alterations to their property or whatever it might be. I think we need to look seriously at simple things like waiving charges perhaps for people going into those processes, because we do want people to be engaged in heritage protection. And of course Russell, it's a pretty hot topic as we've heard and as we know. I think they put in some quite compelling arguments up, and obviously they're very willing to defend those arguments. So to the extent we can mediate these outcomes rather than nobody wants to end up in an environment court, so I think there's real pressure on in that whole heritage area. I've had some conversations with Heritage New Zealand people just informally, and obviously we all want to protect that heritage which is unique to Northland, and the district plan is a big part of that, and there are real challenges in that. So I hope we would be very positive in terms of enabling people and encouraging them to be part of that solution, not just part of the problem. Yeah, it's enough for me given the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Quinlan, Councillor Tiffany.
Kia ora, Madam Chair. Kia ora, I just wanted to take this opportunity to thank you for your very broad shoulders. I know that we stood in front of 2,000 protesters on Friday as elected members in front of the Memorial Hall here, but that doesn't take away from the fact that I attended with you on 2 occasions 2 of our community meetings, and that was the same, just on smaller scales. And we went to Mitimiti and you probably got home after 11 p.m. that night by the time we'd finished it. The Kawakawa Hui had like 500 people at it. So if anything, you've had those 2,000 people times, I don't know how many meetings you've already been to, times 10. So I do just want to acknowledge you that you've been getting that all the way through here. I wanted to just reiterate the importance going forward from here. I know that we're putting a pause on our SMA mahi, and that all eyes are kind of looking at central and regional government levels right now too. But that the loudest we heard, and the loudest was tangata whenua, were that they need to be in the room at the table with us when we're moving forward, and that is going to be crucial for whatever that looks like for our draft district plan going forward. And it can't be let's just have a hui, you come. It might be that we come to you and we come to you 10 times and I'll be next to you when we do that, but we do need to make sure that we do that properly going forward. So whatever falls out of all of this, there's so much learnings to do, but thank you for all the mahi you've been doing, Greg. Kia kaha tonu, keep at it, and you've got some elected members who definitely need to be along the way too, because I don't want to stand in front of another crowd of 2,000 protesters, to be honest. So kia ora.
Thank you, Councillor Tiffany. I might jump in and then I'll hand to Councillor Foy. Greg, again, thank you. Thank you for all of the mahi in this space, and I look forward to working with you and to the team. Absolutely. It's phenomenal what you guys churn out with such a small team who've worked so closely together for so long, and I want to acknowledge that. I also want to take the opportunity, since we're on live stream, to remind our communities that they are engaging with human beings, that these are people, and to invite them to consider the way that they engage with our team, because that's really important. You need your cups filled in order to do this mahi, so thank you. I did have one question, and it's following on from what Councillor Tiffany has raised. On page 115, it talks about the engagement with iwi authorities being carried out in May through to July. I just wanted to take the opportunity to raise that we shouldn't just be talking with our iwi authorities. At a minimum, we have an obligation to our MOU partners. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, and any further learnings we can take from where we've been in the last month, and recognising our limited resources that you have as well. But our MOU partners absolutely need to be a part of that conversation. So just wanted to raise that. The only other point I wanted to bring up, and it's not necessarily relevant to this, but I note that in our climate change roadmap within the implementation plan, we made a commitment to ensuring that we consider how we enable a reduction of our district's carbon footprint through our district plan. So as we go through this, the next couple of months of this process, that's a question that I'll be asking, how we're considering that, especially looking at what Councillor Cleveland has raised with our active modes and reducing our footprint in that space and enabling our communities to reduce their footprint. So those are my comments, and again, thank you. Councillor Ford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thanks for coming today, Greg. You should have never had your name at the bottom of that letter that was sent out to 2,000 people, and I'm sure our CEO has learned from that, and that we're, an organisation, we're a team, and I'm sure that we've learned about that as well. So sorry if you experienced anything personally as a result of that, because that should have never happened. I just wanted to say that publicly as well, because it's hard being a messenger. So district planning, that's something I'm always interested in, and in particular infrastructure. And it's good that Andy's here today, because something that's always going to come up as part of district planners, infrastructure and latent capacity and density infill within our urban areas. And I'm glad that it's come back as one of the urban sustainability issues, because our current framework allows for additional density for housing, but not for necessarily for subdivision. In particular, the lack of information there about unit titling if we're going to have smaller density of housing. So I think as an infrastructure department and with the district plan team, I'm not sure what additional resources we need to put into that space as we come up closer to the proposed plan. But I would really like to hear from the staff, and in particular probably the practitioners, about what we're missing in that space and if we need to allow for that additional resource now instead of at a later date as part of the court processes necessarily. So I just want to highlight that as what I see as a significant risk. I've got some positives here, so I thought that I would say some of those. ISO plan, great, fantastic initiative. Love that it's got the links to the definitions. That's really great. Really great kind of Whenua chapter and more enabling framework. I also note in the feedback here, we haven't really got a lot of feedback about the hazards. And I think the reason for that is people don't know how much it will affect them, and I don't want a repeat of the SNA. So I think it's really important for us to highlight if someone's in a hazard, which NRC have done, but they don't know that, for example, they won't be able to build a deck if it's more than 30 square metres, or they won't be able to have any additional structure, any houses over 100 square metres, or that they will need a resource consent to build the house. I think that this will be a shock to a lot of people, given the extent of the flood zones in our area, which is different to coastal hazards, because people already know that you're in a coastal hazard most of the time. You sort of know that you're by a beach, but not really about the coastal flood hazards, which are quite a lot bigger now. And the other one we haven't really addressed is housing, like Airbnbs. That's something that I've heard from the public a lot more, and other councils have used that as part of their district plan framework to enable a financial platform within the rating system. So the different silos of council, we need to ensure that we might be creating an instrument for a district plan for enforcement through our rating system. Engineering standards are out at the moment. Elected members have never had a workshop about engineering standards. I know they're technical, but what it actually means is either we're going to have a really enabling district plan, or we're going to have really a lot of barriers, a lot of very expensive barriers that will mean that people don't necessarily do things, or try to do things and then they realise they can't because they've got 15 pages of engineering conditions to fulfil and that are unrealistic. So I think that would be great to have a workshop in our engineering standards, and also a workshop with our practitioners as elected members to hear what in practice those might be. I think that's enough from me, but that's just some initial feedback, and thank you for the work, because we're getting down to the pointy end of the pen.
Thank you, Councillor Foy. While you stretched standing orders a little bit, and I respect that you kept it to 8 minutes, so thank you. Do we have any further comments or questions for Greg before we wrap this item up? Councillor Collard?
Yeah, comment from me. I have listened diligently to everything that's gone before, and probably the thing that sticks in my mind is, of course, Thursday and Friday last week, and what we needed to do to show the people that we were listening. And one of the messages that I got from that was that they didn't believe we had done up until that time. Now, whether that be the iwi or landowners, big farmers, and or anybody that had a bitch about what was happening, I am like Moko over here. I don't really want to face another crowd like that, as much as we need to do it from time to time. But surely we can manage ourselves better to communicate with our people, so that we know where it's at. We're in a position where we can negotiate and or deal with it much better.
Thank you, Councillor Collard, and that will be an ongoing process that we'll look at alongside the team going forward. Councillor Court.
Thank you. With my roading hat on, I'm mindful that the government's set a very ambitious agenda of change. And I'm signalling this, I guess, because I don't know how we capture this in a district plan, where we have a district plan that has an incredibly long lead-in period that needs to be massaged, and a very ambitious change agenda by the current Minister of Transport to compel New Zealanders into modal shift. And that has implications for our district plans. So, for example, electric charging stations every 16 kilometres, compelling people to walk or use public transport or cycling rather than reliance on roads. Not shy about telling us that their ambition is to get people out of cars and using alternative forms of transport. Now, how that applies in a rural environment is a little bit vague to me. Despite my colleague thinking I'm going to get out and park my V8 up and get on my push bike, I can assure him if it was anything like the weather last Saturday, that wouldn't be happening. And it doesn't really work with my dress code, with the fact that my husband will inevitably ring me and ask me to stop at the building supply store and pick up something on the way home, usually 20 kgs of nails, something else like that. So I've been a little bit facetious, but I think I need to be a little bit facetious to make the point that we have to somehow, with the wisdom of John, or you somehow, with the wisdom of John, and I know you have that wisdom in you, have to design a district plan that is agile enough to be able to accommodate a rapidly changing and dynamic transport space within the next couple of years. I just settled that down. I'm sure you're aware of it. I don't have any words of wisdom for you other than there is going to be less reliance on roads moving forward and more reliance on alternative forms of transportation that we somehow need to accommodate in amongst rural and urban sustainability. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Ford. Greg, did you have any response to that or anything you'd like to add? Or I can move on to Councillor Stratford.
Can I just just say thank you very much for the issues raised and the opportunity needed for us to work in a different way. Can I just respond to that last issue? I think there is, in our planning kind of hierarchy, there is a bit of a gap at the moment in terms of spatial planning and future development strategies, and that's an active piece of work. And I think if you can demonstrate some further coherency about how our growth is going to be coordinated from a transport perspective, it'll be easier for us to then put in place measures in the district plan. So at the end of next year, there is the Strategic Planning Act and the Natural Built Environment Act that will start to be introduced, but we should be gearing up for that process sooner rather than later, and having it as much informing our district planning process at the same time. So the really valid points made. Can I also respond to Councillor Clendon's issue about this is the last opportunity really for this level of participation in plan making. It's true. Plan making is a very deliberative, iterative process. Every step encourages participation, and we can see the value of that right now. That opportunity is not going to be there in the future. So this is a great chance for us to bed down the right direction for our communities, for sustainable management, before it does get massaged, picked up, put into these new planning frameworks. So it's really valuable, and it's the last chance. So, we want to make the most of that opportunity.
Thank you, Greg. Councillor Stratford, closing comments.
Woohoo! So just off the back of what Councillor Boy and Councillor Collar have raised, I just want to, in under a minute, I promise, we need to take what happened with the significant natural areas, and I didn't want to bring it up, and rebuild the relationships. And the opportunity is now. We had COVID, we built some relationships with tangata whenua last year, and then it's kind of slipped away. We need to go back and rebuild these again, and we need to maintain them. And we've got the district plan, we've got the road speed consultation, and we've also got the Māori wards representation boundaries, participation on committees. We've got a busy time ahead of us, but it comes down to getting out of these rooms and getting in front of the people and listening to them. And we've just got to go out with our ears open, as McCall said, but we can't stop. This is all very important, and let the people build it. We provide the way and let the people build it.
Thank you, Councillor Stratford, and thank you, Greg, for being with us. So on that note, the recommendation in front of us that the Strategy and Policy Committee receive the report update on draft district plan engagement, moved by Councillor Stratford, seconded by Councillor Vusic. All in favour? Aye. Those against? No. Carried. Fantastic. 12:30 on the dot. That brings us to the end of our committee meeting. Thank you, everybody, for your robust participation. Darren, Sean, thank you to your team for the collaboration that you've had in this committee meeting. It's been a big day. On that note, Councillor Stratford, could I ask you to close us with a karakia, please? Thank you.
Kia tau, kia tātou katoa, te ata whai o tō tātou ariki, o ihi koraisi tō e te aroha, o te atua me te whiwhinga tahi